We have a nice office, but I remember when I did purchase my office and had it built out, I told I hired an ex-patient of mine who actually happened to do design work for healthcare offices. And I specifically told her I wanted nice, but I didn't want over the top. I didn't want all, marble floors and granite countertops and all that, because there's a psychology of, the patient doesn't want to see their chiropractor pulling up in the Lamborghini, and they don't want to go in and see statues of themselves in marble flooring, because it can be a little bit too much where they're saying, oh, okay, now I know why I'm paying so much. So we designed it nice with a really good workflow and a nice open concept, and it's worked out well for us.
Welcome to today's episode of the Providers, Properties, and Performance podcast. I hope you enjoy this interview that I had with Kevin Christie, who's the owner of HealthFit Chiropractic and Sports Recovery in Florida, where he specializes in soft tissue treatment, specifically on athletes to help them recover from injury and improve their performance. He takes us through the path of him being an entrepreneurial private practice clinician, how he started his private practice, purchased the real estate that he operates in, and continues to grow and expand as an entrepreneur. I hope you enjoy this episode, and thank you for listening. So Kevin, welcome to the Providers, Properties, and Performance podcast. I'm really excited to interview you today.
Yeah, thank you for your opportunity and time. I'm looking forward to it.
So I would call you a very entrepreneurial private practice physician. So I want you to start by telling me about your practice, HealthFit Chiropractic and Sports Recovery.
Yeah, definitely. We are a sports chiropractic practice. I've been practicing for 16 years and own my own practice for 11 years now. And we treat a lot of active people, athletes, regular folks as well. But we do equal parts, chiropractic for sure. A lot of muscle work as well, and then a lot of rehab exercises. So when a patient comes in, they get a full functional assessment and evaluation. We treat musculoskeletal conditions, and if it's anything outside of that, or if it's a traumatic injury that's got some kind of structural damage, we know to get that out of the office. But a lot of it's just overuse sports injuries or sprain strains, and we figure out what's going on, and then from there, they typically get those three things: manipulation, soft tissue work, and the rehab exercises.
And so why did you decide to go into private practice?
Yeah, I was an athlete growing up. I actually knew I wanted to be a chiropractor at age 17. I went to Florida State University with an exercise physiology major, and I worked with a lot of the athletes there as kind of an intern for strength and conditioning. Was really into fitness and all that. And then by the time I went to Logan College of Chiropractic in St. Louis, I really knew that A, I wanted to work with the athletic population, and B, I wanted my own practice at some point. And luckily for me, after about 4 years, that happened, and I had a lot of cool opportunities along the way. But I work well with others, but I definitely knew that I wanted to do things my way. So I made sure I went on that path and ultimately got there.
So tell me the story behind how you started a HealthFit Chiropractic and Sports Recovery.
Yeah. So I graduated in 2005, and I worked for a great chiropractor in Coral Springs, Florida for about a year and a half. And then I was doing a lot of things. I've always been one to get out there. I was working a lot of golf tournaments, doing a lot of talks for triathlon and running groups. And there was another chiropractor down in Miami who got an opportunity to open up a second office in the Fort Lauderdale area of South Florida that was inside of a sports training facility. And I was really happy with the job I had. I didn't want to leave, but he had me come check it out. And this would have been in the summer or the early part of 2007. And I went into this big gym, but really not very aesthetically pleasing. But I walk in there, and if anybody's like NFL fans, it was quite a who's who of NFL players working out there. And that would be my practice would be inside of there in a partnership. And so I took it. It was a risk at the time. I wasn't guaranteed any salary. I had to build the practice kind of on my own. The other chiropractor was more of just the business behind it type of person. But it gave me a ton of experience, a ton of great opportunities to work with the high level athletes. And then ultimately, partnerships can run their course. And it was fine. It was a good, fine split. I basically sold my 40% back to him and opened up my own practice in outside of my non-compete, which was up in Boca Raton, Florida, because I actually just got a very lucky opportunity. It kind of comes full circle where my mentor, the chiropractor that I worked for out of school, mentioned that there was a really good orthopedic group that was looking to rent a room to a chiropractor. And so I met with them, went well. It was an easy way for me to open up my own practice without a lot of overhead. I had basically a 4,000 square foot office where I had two rooms in. Very nice. It was a very good orthopedic office. And so my patients would walk in, like, oh, wow, it's a really nice office, and all I was doing was paying a little bit of rent. And that's how my practice started. And it just made a lot of sense. I didn't have to take out a business loan because I sold my 40%. So I had a little bit of liquidity. And then I didn't have a lot of overhead, being that I was just renting a couple rooms. And so it worked out really well. And it ramped up pretty quickly, which was nice.
So did you see the orthopedic patients pre or
Mhm.
post surgery, or to try to not have to go into surgery, or all of the
Yeah,
above?
the last part, I don't do any pre or post op
Yeah.
work, and never have. We would be a musculoskeletal conservative option for them. And then really, to be honest with you, I got some referrals from the orthopedic group, but it was really on me to build my own practice, and I was able to do that and get patients from other outside sources.
Well, and in chiropractic, you could do one thing or many
Mhm,
things, and you chose to focus on sports recovery, specifically
mhm,
the soft tissue treatments. And so, what
mhm.
did just your experience in sports lead you in that direction, or something else?
Yeah, I'm certified in something called active release techniques, which it's a pretty elaborate certification. It does a really good job of diagnosing soft tissue, muscle strain, sprains, and then gives you a hands-on approach to actually fix it. And that particular technique is highly sought after by a lot of different groups, professional sports being one of them. Having that active release technique certification was what helped me get inside that training facility that had all the pro athletes. And then, fortunately for me, I legitimately treated about 300 pro athletes in a 3-year period of time at that facility. And I started going to the NFL Combine with these groups because they had a 2-month program that would train the college athletes to be prepared for the NFL Combine. And I was the clinical director for it. So I would go up there, and I actually went to 12 of those in a row up until last year, which because of the pandemic, or this year, I should say. Yeah, it was a great opportunity to work with a technique that was highly sought after by athletes. And then it became a snowball effect. Once I got known for working with NFL players, I was getting some major league players, then golfers, and it went from there. I was lucky to travel on the PGA Tour in 2011 as well with some pro golfers, and so I've had some really cool opportunity in the sports, what we kind of call the sports chiropractic realm. I think the general population doesn't realize that, like, every sports team has a chiropractor on staff,
Mhm.
right? Because I get it. Like, chiropractic has a bad reputation. A lot of people won't use chiropractors, but it's ironic because the most performance based humans on the planet all have chiropractors. And as we record this, the Olympics is going on, and I keep on seeing in my Facebook group, because I've got a pretty big network of chiropractors, how many chiropractors are over there treating Olympic athletes for the United States. And so it's such a staple in the athletic kind of training room and the care of athletes, that I'm surprised not everybody has one at their disposal.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I have a friend that works for a professional sports team, and I was having this discussion where you're constantly hearing how these athletes are injured, and it's not the
Mhm.
broken bones, it's but they can't play. And he said it's all soft tissue
Yep.
injuries. And, do you feel that the training, it's just getting harder, more
Mhm.
specialized, or attributing to the need, to
Mhm.
focus on recovery and repair before you keep pushing yourself forward?
It's a very astute question because we kind of chew on that year after year. It's like, why are athletes in better shape than they ever have been, getting more care, eating better, all these things, better training. They're training well in the off season, but they're getting more hurt all the time, and injuries are just insane, especially for someone like football. But I think it's a confluence of factors. One of them in particular, some of these sports is they've become so big, fast, and strong
Mhm.
that physics takes over. And I just think that's part of it. Now, some of the training I do think leads to that. Not all trainers, there's some really great trainers out there, but some of it does lead to injury. And then there's a fine line of, you know, you have to get them this big, fast, and strong and powerful. Otherwise, they won't even
They,
be playing,
yeah, they can't
right?
compete.
So it's a catch 22 for sure. But we're trying everything we can from all angles to try to keep athletes healthy. It's definitely a tug of war battle.
Well, let's talk about your location. So,
Mhm.
you have offices in Boca Raton and Miami, Florida,
Yep.
and you said you chose, I think, one of them for a non-compete,
Mhm.
but how did you select specifically, the locations for your
Mhm.
practice?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually just sold the Miami office last year towards the tail end of the year to the doctor that had been running it since 2012. That was always in the cards, and then we expedited a little bit during the pandemic. But it's still part of our website and group and all that, and we help each other out. So I opened up the Boca Raton office inside of the orthopedic group, which was just Boca was outside of my non-compete, and the orthopedic doctor was willing to let me rent space. So it kind of just happened that way. I'm from the surrounding area here, so I knew Boca Raton was a great place to be. It's a very affluent, well-rounded city, and so and I knew that the orthopedic doctor did his due diligence when he purchased his office suite. And so I figured the demographics and all that lined up pretty well. So I jumped on it, and then with my connections in the sports world, there was a guy who did a lot of stretching for athletes. And he opened up a spot down in Wynwood, Miami, which at the time, 2012, was a little seedy. It's now it was up and coming, but seedy. Now it's come, it's full fledged. It's real nice, cool area, trendy. Um, and he opened up a nice spot there, and we just subletted space, kind of like I subletted out of the orthopedic office. I subletted
Mhm.
out of there, and that did well out of the gates. I hired a doctor from Chicago who wanted to get down here, and he's the doc now that owns that particular location. So now I'm only owner of the Boca Raton office now.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so when your patients come in for a treatment, you said you liked how the NFL facility, how that felt. So when your patients come to your office, how do you
Mhm.
want them to feel about your office, like when they're
Mhm.
coming in for treatment?
Yeah, one of the things that resonated me so much with Strategic Coach when I started with them in 2013 was the front stage, backstage concept that they have. And just for the audience that may not have heard that, basically, you go to a play and you see everything that happens on the front stage, but then there's the backstage that supports that. And it's no different in my business where the front stage has to be really good. We tend to call it the patient experience,
Mhm.
and everything from the phones being answered to a nice office to all the different things that are there. And it's interesting because we have a nice office, but I remember when I did purchase my office and had it built out, I told my I hired an ex-patient of mine who actually happened to do design work for healthcare offices,
Mhm.
and I specifically told her I wanted nice, but I didn't want over the top. I didn't want all marble floors and granite countertops and all that, because there's a psychology of the patient doesn't want to see their chiropractor pulling up in the Lamborghini, and they don't want to go in and see statues of themselves in marble flooring, because it can be a little bit too much where they're saying, oh, okay, now I know why I'm paying so much for that. So we designed it nice with a really good workflow and a nice open concept, and it's worked out well for us.
Very nice. And then
Mhm.
why did you decide to purchase the real estate instead
Mhm.
of just lease an office?
Yeah. So the orthopedic group that I was renting from, that was from 2010 to 2013. It's inside of a two-story, two-building medical office condo building. And the problem I had was I was growing. I hired another doctor. I only had two rooms. We had an open PT area in there that helped out, but we were definitely outgrowing that. And so my first concern was I needed to provide stability for my practice.
Mhm.
So that was like, okay, I got to find a spot for the long term of here because I was on a year-to-year lease with the ortho group, and I just had this sense at some point he may say, you know what, you're just too busy and it's causing too much of an issue, right? And so I started looking, and I just noticed pulling in one day that there was actually a sign for a suite in our actual building that I'm in, where I was in, for sale. And this would have been early 2013. I was like, oh, that, I had talked to some chiropractor, like the chiropractor that I worked for right out of the gates. He owned his building, and so I knew it was a good idea. I just didn't know if it was attainable. So I investigated it, and it worked out because that early part of 2013, the commercial real estate market still was pretty depressed, compared, because of the '08 stuff. And it still was pretty reasonable, especially in this area. It's not cheap. And I was able to pull it off. And so I figured, okay, not only am I providing stability for my practice, and that was going to be long-term stability, because one of the big things that you got to realize is that at the time I was 33 years old, and I was going to be doing this for a very long time. And if my rent was, let's just call it 4,000 a month in 2013, what's it going to be in 2033? Right? It's going to be like $14,000. So my mortgage is going to be the same in 2033 as it was in 2013. I'm not going to
Right.
refinance. So that was a big part of it. And then just the investment side of it. I knew that it was a good investment. And so I really pushed the envelope to make it happen. I mean, it was a big undertaking with everything, and it worked out really well. So I pulled the trigger on it, qualified. I did the SBA loan, which they want everything possible. and
Absolutely.
and and my practice at the time was only just over 3 years in business. So I literally just had the 3 years of financials that they wanted, and it worked out
Just enough.
just enough. I felt really good about myself after I qualified for the loan. That's for sure.
Yeah, I call it a deep dive financial exam for sure.
Oh, everything.
Um, so so obviously the lowering your cost of occupancy or making it
Yeah.
known every year was important to you. Was,
Mhm.
did you feel like you were also making an investment in yourself where
Mhm.
um, the success of your practice, you- um, you, you could have some additional passive income in addition to, having a successful practice?
Yeah, and I'll answer there's two parts to that. One was I had a feeling, and it came to fruition, that if I had my own big 3,000 square foot space, I would be able to generate more revenue and profits in the practice because I could grow, which
Mhm.
which has happened, right? So there was an ROI for the practice. And then two, obviously, every time I pay rent to my holding company, some of that is interest and some of that is principal, and so that principal is going towards my retirement. And then three, I actually do currently have over the last 4 years, a physical therapy group that rents from me, and I get a pretty nice rent check from that each month as well. So it's been really nice in that regard, for sure.
So if there's another fellow clinician, contemplating between owning or
Mhm.
leasing space for its practice, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I would say you got to go through kind of an audit of where you're at. One is, are you going to be in that area for good? Like, you're really sure. We can't be 100% sure, but you're not like 50-50. I knew this was where I wanted to be in practice and in life for quite a long time. So I would say that's one thing. Two, consider buying more space than you currently need, because you really don't want to outgrow the space you bought, because it's a
Right.
lot harder, right? It's easier to end a lease and get into a new lease with bigger space versus having to try to sell and then buy another space. It doesn't always work out so smooth that way. So buy, there's a kind of a gray area. You want to buy more than what you need currently, but you don't want to overextend either to where you buy too much you can't afford it. So definitely consider that. And then, um, can you do it? Do you have the liquidity to put down a nice, the down payment? And then can you do it without sacrificing your practice's finances? I've seen that before, where the build out goes over, the cost is way up because now you got things like cam fees you maybe didn't have before. There's a lot of different things. You like the air conditioning breaks, and that's on you now, right? So make sure that you do not strain your practice or your personal life just to make this happen. So I think
Right.
those are a few big hitters to cross off before. And then, honestly, it's going to be really hard for some people to do this in certain areas, in certain professions, right? If you're a chiropractor, the revenue is a lot lower than a plastic surgeon or an orthopedic or a brain surgeon or something like that. And so if you're a chiropractor in, downtown San Francisco, buying is kind of for the multimillionaires
Right.
in those areas. So I can't give a blanket statement that every chiropractor or doctor should own their space. There are some situations where it's just untenable. The amount of buying it's pretty crazy.
Right. And they need to tap into they need to be in a location where their patients, need them. And there just may not be that option.
Yep, for sure.
Um, so how do you manage? So, your
Mhm.
practice is obviously, I would imagine, where you prefer to spend your time. So who do you have that like manages the landlord part of the real estate so that you can focus on serving
Well,
your patients?
yeah, it's a good question. Well, I've actually reversed that. I treat patients twice a week now, so I've started to step out of care, and I'm actually going to step completely out of care summer of 2022. Because in addition to the private practice, which again, strategic coaches help me make it a self-managing practice in a lot of ways, I also have a whole other company that's around marketing and business for chiropractors. So like I have my own podcast and
Yeah.
I consult chiropractors, and that actually business has really grown and has given me kind of a freedom of location and schedule. And so I do a lot with that. And so I kind of manage a lot of the stuff. And I actually am the president of our actual condo association for the medical building, because I like to control things a little bit, but this building was built in 1985 and it looked like it. And so I took over and I had a kind of a 3-year plan with the board to modernize it. And we actually just finished it. I'm actually in the middle of typing up the email to send to all the owners on everything from all 4 elevators been replaced, the roof's been replaced. We had a very healthy financial association, which allowed for a lot of this. But I mean, we did a lot of work over 3 years and it just looks wonderful now, which has increased the value of everybody's unit inside of it, which has been nice. So
Absolutely.
to answer your question, I kind of oversee everything, but I do have a lot of support system, either lateral to me or underneath me. So,
Yeah. No, it's just interesting to see how each different practice handles that because
mhm.
um all right, so we're going to move now, Kevin, into the
Mhm.
get to know you part of the
Okay.
interview. So what was your first job?
My first job was at Winn-Dixie as a bag boy at age 14. Great job.
It's interesting. So far,
Mhm.
pretty much everyone that I've asked what was their first job, it was either at a grocery store,
Mhm.
babysitting, newspaper route,
Mhm.
busboy, all those things. And I
Yeah.
think it's
I
great.
I will say the first thing one of the early things I did to earn money before I could legally work for an entity without having child labor law issues was my dad was like, you should just go buy he bought me a squeegee and bucket and all that. And I went around the neighborhood asking if they wanted the outside of their windows, like their house windows,
Yeah.
cleaned. Cause everybody had kind of down here in South Florida, it gets kind of nasty. And I made a killing doing it. Everybody thought it was a great idea. So that was
Yeah.
one of my first entrepreneurial aspects of my life.
What would you be doing for a living if you were not a chiropractor?
Yeah, I really really enjoy the business side of things, and so I would, the easy answer is an entrepreneur, but I really think marketing in business would be that I would be some kind of like CMO or something of that sort.
Oh, very interesting. So, what or who are you reading or listening to
Mhm.
right now for news, information, or inspiration?
Oh yeah, I do a lot of that. So I read a physical book, I listen to an audiobook, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. The book I just finished listening to, which I highly recommend, was actually Matthew McConaughey's book Green Lights, and
Oh, yeah.
I recommend listening to it because he's just entertaining.
Yeah.
He's my favorite actor of all. He's just amazing, and the book is great. It's a memoir, and he's got a lot of good learning lessons from it. It's helped me out because he talks about when he decided he was putting his foot in the ground and never doing a rom-com again. I don't know if you remember that. He disappeared for a couple of years because Hollywood basically disappeared him when he kept on
Yeah.
turning down high lucrative rom-coms, and but he knew what he wanted to do, and ultimately it worked out for him because he's done a lot of drama after that, and so he reinvented himself. And so that's been giving me some help in this transition I'm going to make over the next 11 months of getting out of patient care, and just realize like I got to put my foot down, and I've made the decision already, and I got to stick through the tough storm that it will be early on. And so that was a great book that I was listening to, which I enjoyed.
Yeah.
And yeah, just I got a lot out of it. I really liked it.
I saw an interview with him on that book, and
Mhm.
it's on my list. But yeah, he's a lot of fun. So
Oh, he's
I'm
great.
looking
The
forward to it.
story of it's just funny because he lived such an amazing life, but he came from such a really bad family situation, and he just was like luckily discovered to play a bit part in Dazed and Confused, and he did such a good job on his like 3 lines he was supposed to have that they added more in for him, and the rest is history, which is crazy.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
What is one thing you do every day for healthy self-care?
Oh, I go for a walk in the morning with my 15-month-old son and my 11-year-old Weimaraner. Yeah, I
Nice.
get up. I'm the first one up with the baby every morning until 7:30. He gets up at like 5:30, which is not fun. But we go for a good walk, and I don't get on my phone. I don't listen to anything. We go for a nice walk, and that really starts the day off pretty well for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
So this next one, I can ask you both questions.
Mhm,
I usually have one that's just for uh, investors, but you're both.
mhm.
So I'm going to start with do you think a person is born with the desire to heal, or is this learned only through their like medical training?
I think there's some people that are naturally born with it, and they've got a level of empathy and bedside manner that really lends itself to it. And then you definitely have to get obviously trained to do it. And then I think there's some people that get trained to do it but don't have it naturally and aren't really a healer. And it's okay. They could still be great doctors, and they could be honest with themselves and stuff like that. So I
Yeah.
think it kind of goes both ways because there definitely are some natural healers, and there's some others that aren't.
Yeah, and then there's I think different specialties. Like some physicians, you care more that they have a good success record, like
Hmm.
brain surgery or heart surgery,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
less on whether or not they have bedside manner.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, you kind of don't want your brain surgeon to be overly emotional. Like there's like I remember reading a thing. It's like you almost want them to be borderline like psychotic because you don't want them worrying about am I gonna make a mistake for this person. You want them to be very objective and just kind of like detached from it and really
Yeah,
focus on what they need to. It's a weird psychology on some specialties of medicine because it's so difficult and life changing and altering, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, you're working on someone's brain or heart. It's a
right.
little bit different for sure.
Absolutely. And then do you think leaders are born or trained?
I think charisma is born. It's a hard one. I know there's a book I think called Learn Charisma or something like that, but I do think charisma and communication can be inherently born. But I always feel like I'm a big believer in, having a growth mindset. And I think people, if they aren't naturally charismatic, but they want to become a good leader, it's really going to be about doubling down on communication and meetings and one-on-ones and things like that. And that's what I'm actually, it's a good question you asked me this time, because I realized that for me to step out of care in the next level, 11 months, I really need to double down on leadership and communication. I feel like I do a pretty good job of it, but pretty good is not going to take me to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kevin, this has been a great interview. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is fun.